50 years ago, the Kinks released an album that, over the past 5 decades, has risen in stature as part of their catalog. Arthur, or The Decline and Fall of the British Empire, now sits alongside such lofty company as the Kinks Are the Village Green Preservation Society, or the album Muswell Hillbillies, and now, in 2019, this album is getting the deluxe treatment, with multiple discs, packed with rarities and lost tracks. And the man who's spearheaded this project, as well as many, many similar archival projects over the years, joins us right now, Grammy-nominated producer Andrew Sandoval. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. We've wanted you on the show for quite some time, and now's a good opportunity. And I know that you're working, or you worked closely with Ray Davies on this set.
That's right.
And I know that Arthur, if we just go back in time to 1969, the genesis of this album, it was supposed to be the soundtrack to a British TV movie. I don't know if it was the BBC or something like that, but the whole project fell apart, and the album comes out, and there's no movie. It's a soundtrack to something that doesn't exist. So I know over the years, Ray hasn't been all that thrilled about the record or didn't want to think about it, but now, having worked with you on this project, I'm guessing that he's turned a corner on it, and he enjoys it now.
Yeah, I would say that that's true. Also, he has forthcoming from the BBC in November a full radio play that will realize his original ambition with this project. And to give you a little bit of a background on it, in early 1969, Granada Television, which was not the BBC but a different commissioning network for British television, reached out to Ray about the idea of putting on a sort of pop opera on television. And that was what became the Arthur Project. And the project went along very far. It wasn't just that they had this idea and he decided to write a bunch of songs and then they bailed out on it and he decided, okay, well, I'm going to put out an album anyway. What actually occurred was that the show got very far along. It became a full script. He wrote all the songs. He recorded all of them in advance. They were all set. They had a cast. And everything was set to go within a couple of weeks. There was a production meeting, and the producer of the program was asked about some budget points. He said, well, I don't have those at the moment, but we'll get it figured out right away. And they said, not good enough, we're pulling the plug on this. So I think for a lot of people, they believe that, oh, this is another of these Kinks fantasy projects that, you know, they were going to do that didn't happen, and now we just have this sort of orphaned record. But in reality, it was a very, very full-blown production, and he's now at least gotten to the point where there's a new script that he did with a new writer, and it's going to be heard as a radio play.
Oh, very cool. We'll have to look out for that. So for the average rock and roll fan who maybe already owns some iteration of the Arthur record, for example, I have the 2004 Sanctuary release, which has some bonus material, but obviously with this box set, you're getting much more bonus material, and this is a major sonic upgrade, right?
Yes, it is. I mean, we started from scratch on this. It's not copied over. There was also a 2011 2-CD edition of Arthur that came out in the UK. I worked on both of those,
right?
To be honest. But for this, we went back to the original masters, both the mono and stereo. So all of the original mixes from 1969 are included. And then in addition to those, at the ends of each of the mono and stereo discs, you get alternate mixes that were not ever issued on any other compilation. So work in progress things like there's an acetate of Australia that has overdubs that are not on the final master, that they erased over, that they only survive on this one acetate, the only known copy of it. There are rough mixes he turned into Warner Brothers, who were the U.S. label for him in 1969, that he just needed to show them that he was doing work on the record, and so these snapshots exist only in their vault. There's some new mixes from the 8-track multitracks that we found. We don't have all of the multitracks for the album, or else there would have been more new mixes, but I did some new mixes that show different parts of the productions and things that are buried on the original mixes, like there's a full string section on the bridge of Victoria that you don't really hear on the final mixes. And then the third disc is Dave Davies and his album that he was doing right at the same time as Arthur, and it's not a solo project per se, it's really a Kinks project. It's produced by Ray. Ray co-wrote and wrote a few of the songs on the record, and it's backed by the Kinks, with Dave singing lead on all the tracks. It was an album that, at the time, they decided not to put out in 1969, and so it's included here because it's done at exactly the same sessions as Arthur. There's also the original mono mixes. There's the full stereo mix of that album, and then we went back to the multi-tracks that we had for some of the songs and did new mixes to show you, again, bits and pieces, longer versions of some songs, one acoustic remix, and then the fourth disc is Ray's vision of the making of Arthur and also things that happen after. So it includes home demo recordings of some of the songs, him writing the songs, and then he brought the Kinks to his house to rehearse all of the songs on the album, and they played through all of the songs in his living room, and he recorded it on a reel-to-reel. So he's got some excerpts of that, and then some newer recordings, including some things he did this year, a redone version of the song Arthur, but also some new songs that have not been heard on any other Kinks record that are involving the characters of the album Arthur. And then some BBC recordings. So it's really got a lot of material and a lot of things that have never been anywhere else. I know a lot of people will say, well, I bought this version or I bought that version or whatever, and why would I need anything else? Well,
right.
It's for the greater education of everybody, and the stuff exists so that everybody can have it, and it's preserved, and that's what's important.
That was the mono mix of the song King Kong, one of the many bonus goodies in this 50th anniversary box set of the 1969 album The Kinks, Arthur, or The Decline and Fall of the British Empire. Our guest today is the man who put this all together, Andrew Sandoval. And before we get any deeper into this box set, and I probably should have started the interview this way, were you a Kinks fan growing up?
Oh, definitely. I started liking the Kinks from before I was even a teenager. My brother was a huge Kinks fan and took me to see them when I was 11, and I became a huge Kinks fan. But I went really back into their 60s music, and that became a real fascination for me. And then obviously got educated on the 70s, and then the 80s music I heard as it came out. But Arthur was a record that I loved a great deal growing up, and in fact it was one of the first CDs I ever bought in 1987, an import version of it that came out from a label called PRT, which was Precision Records and Tapes, and they had bought the Pie catalog.
Right.
And so I still have that CD, and the Village Green Preservation Society, which I did a box set on last year, is my favorite album of all time by any artist. So the Kinks are very near and dear to me at all times.
You know, it just occurred to me when you said you were working with Ray Davies on this, there have been rumors of the Kinks getting back together. And without betraying any confidences, would you have any insight into these rumors?
Well, I do know it is a fact that Ray and Dave Davies have been recording and working through material that is unissued to date, some older recordings and some newer songs, and trying to work forward to make a record. But there's no set release date for that record. It's not finished as far as I know, but it's been in progress for a number of years. As far as them performing live and all of that, I would assume that would have to follow any kind of record release or whenever they finish their record. So there is Kinks activity, and it's the first since basically '96, I think.
Yeah.
So there's that, but I don't think you're going to see concert tickets going on sale this year or anything. I think they have a ways to go to finish what they want to do, and I'll be happy with whatever music they put out.
Yeah.
Certainly even their last recordings together for To the Bone were really great. There was some great stuff on those. So I'm excited as a fan and consumer to see what they come up with.
And if I'm not mistaken, you also worked on the Kinks 60s box set, didn't you, from several years ago?
I compiled the Kinks anthology that came out about 4 or 5 years ago, which covered their career from 64 through 71. So I picked all the tracks for that and supervised the mastering. And
when you were doing that, were you coming across tracks and thinking, I could save these for...
Well, no, yes and no.
Okay.
I didn't think, I can save these. I put forward everything that I wanted for that set, and ultimately it was Ray who said yay or nay as to what was included, and within 2 or 3 songs, he was okay with all of it. So So that's what means a lot to me, because ultimately I think a lot of fans take an attitude that they should have the final say of what they get to hear,
right.
And the artist doesn't know what they're talking about, or whatever. And I take a very different tact, which is that none of this stuff would exist without Ray or Dave or Mick or Pete or John Dalton, and we're very lucky to have it. And you want to have your best shot at trying to get them to let everyone hear the stuff. Something like Time Song was something I heard years ago, and we discussed it for 4 or 5 years before it came out. I think people just have to, very few people have the patience to sort of sit there for years and years to do these kinds of projects. But I do, because I really love what I do, and I love the music, and I love the people who love it too. So I want them to have it, and I want them to have the best experience.
I couldn't let you go today without talking about two quick things. One would be your long association with the Monkees, and I don't know if this was your intention, but certainly you are the steward of their recorded legacy.
Right. I didn't set out to do that, but I have become the steward of the recorded legacy, and that began in 1989. I met a gentleman named Bill Englund. He was working for Rhino Records, and I got involved in a compilation called Missing Links 2, which I co-compiled with him, and I wrote liner notes for it. And that sort of set up a lot of records I've done over the last 30 years, and was the blossoming of a whole set of things. So in subsequent years, in 2005, I put out a book about the Monkees, which covered all the recording sessions, all some of those things you've seen about the Beatles with all the day-by-day stuff. Well, I did one on the Monkees, and that was quite successful at the time. I plan to do a revised version of that for release next year in their 55th anniversary of their original pilot and casting and things like that. So, it kind of happened organically. And also, over the last 8 years, I've been the producer of their concert tours and worked with them both as solo artists and as a group to perform live shows and things like that. Putting all those together, and the content of the shows, the set lists and the multimedia and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I have the first edition of that book, and it's one of those books where, I guess you could read it from cover to cover, but I jumped around a lot to time period.
And that's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
It was written in a somewhat linear fashion. It's written obviously where the events take place, and it's best to know where they take place.
Right.
However, it is one you jump around in, and it's really more of a textbook in a sense than it's not a straight-on narrative. So you did things the right way, and certainly the revised version will have a lot more details, especially on the things that happened subsequently from 1971 on. But that is the style of that book.
Very cool. And aside from the book, is there anything archival-wise coming from the Monkees in the near future?
Yeah, certainly. The next Super Deluxe edition for the Monkees will be Headquarters, and that'll be different than the one we did in 2000, which were the Headquarters sessions.
Yes.
That will not become obsolete. We have some other sessions we've unearthed, and there's some other things we're going to explore with the New York sessions that preceded Headquarters on that. So it'll be the first time many of us get to hear that. And then there's also supposed to be a live album from Rhino, which covers the last tour that Michael and Mickey did together.
Oh, wonderful.
So that I think is coming out around April.
Okay. All right. And finally, I can't let you go without mentioning your radio show.
Right.
Come to the Sunshine. And I'll tell you something, I started listening to that show years ago, and there have been many times where I've heard you play something, and I'd think, yeah, I'll have that on my show, too. How long have you been doing that program?
Come to the Sunshine, which is on WFMU's Rock and Soul Ichiban, and can be heard there, and also you can find it on, iTunes and Spotify if you look up Come to the Sunshine. It's been going for 13 years. I began it in September of 2006, and so it's a show that's 60s themed, I always say, because it primarily goes around 1960s recordings. Occasionally we'll stray out of that, but it's a rare occasion when we do. And each show is meant kind of in the way the book is. It's more of a lasting thing rather than just a weekly broadcast.
Right.
It's supposed to be kind of like my encyclopedia of the 1960s, and I'm learning as I go along. In the first hour, I usually play a lot of 45s direct from the original records. I don't really play stuff that's not in my collection. I'm out looking for records all the time, and they're kind of no-hit wonders, lots of psychedelia and singer-songwriters, folk rock, garage rock, all kinds of sort of soft pop, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll cover an artist, like there's a Kinks episode, there's a Beach Boys episode,
right.
And usually a lot of unusual recordings that are not heavily anthologized, or I may give you a different side of it, not to be, provocative, but more like, this is the stuff I really love. So in an hour, I try and give you sort of my highlight reel of why I like a certain artist. So there are some very mainstream ones, but then there's a lot of more obscure things where I deal with, say, the Idrisi brothers, who were songwriters
right.
and wrote for the Association, a lot of other people. And, or I'll deal with arrangers and what an arranger's role in a record would be, because you see that credit on a lot of records, arranged by so-and-so, and you're like, well, who cares? Like, I don't care. But then you realize somebody like Jack Nietzsche or,
sure.
Perry Botkin Jr. contributed a lot to the sound, almost as much as the producer. We also talk about producers and songwriters. So it's all about educating yourself or oneself about these different facets of minutia in these 60s records and enjoying them and hearing something you wouldn't hear on another show. So, I'm digging deep.
You certainly are, because I hear you on that show, and you're saying, well, I was at such and such a record store, and I did some digging around, and I picked up this single, which we're going to play today. So,
right, and that's the thing. On my travels, which are touring around the world, in my job, I take a bit of time out each day, if I can, to get out to a record store and try and find some unique things, mostly 45s, and then share them with everybody. And the idea is that I built up this collection, but someday I may not have the collection, so I want to share this music with people and expose them to it. And then someday I can sit back and listen to these old shows and enjoy the records as well.
Fantastic. Andrew, I want to thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us today, and we're going to go out with a little Shangri-La. So I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.